The refusal came at 2:47 p.m. Royal Guard Daniel Morrison heard every word from his post too close to miss. Too professional to intervene. 9-year-old Princess Charlotte stood in the music room, facing her etiquette instructor, and said 5 words that would change everything. "I'm not going to curtsy, or do." Lady Ashworth's face went white. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't a tired child having a moment. This was deliberate defiance from a princess who decided that honoring tradition meant betraying herself. Within minutes, Princess Catherine would arrive. Within hours, Charlotte would face an impossible choice that would define who she'd become. But what nobody knew, not the furious instructor, not the worried staff, not even Catherine herself, was that this 9-year-old's refusal would reveal something about the future of the monarchy that would stun them all. And Daniel Morrison, the guard who witnessed it all, would carry this secret for years before finally revealing what really happened. That afternoon, the autumn rain fell steadily on the grounds of Kensington Palace, creating a rhythmic pattern against the tall windows. Inside the grand drawing room, preparations were underway for an important state dinner that evening. Staff members moved efficiently through the corridors, carrying linens, polishing silverware, and arranging flowers with practiced precision. Royal Guard. Officer Daniel Morrison stood at his assigned post near the family wing, his posture perfect, his red ceremonial uniform immaculate despite having been on duty since early morning. Daniel had served in the Queen's Guard for 9 years, the last 3 specifically assigned to the protection detail for the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children. He had seen the royal children grow, witnessed private family moments, and maintained the discretion expected of someone in his position. But today would test that discretion in ways he'd never anticipated. Today, he would witness something that would stay with him for the rest of his career, something that revealed the true character of young Princess Charlotte, in a moment when she thought no one important was watching. Charlotte was 9 years old now, poised and confident in a way that surprised adults who still expected her to be a shy little girl. She had developed a reputation within the palace for being intelligent, strong-willed, and remarkably perceptive. Staff members often commented that she noticed things others missed, that she asked questions that made people think, and that she possessed a sense of justice unusual for someone her age. The morning had been typical. Charlotte had completed her lessons with her tutor, Miss Pemberton, covering mathematics, French, and history. She had been focused and engaged, asking thoughtful questions about the English Civil War that had impressed her normally hard-to-impress instructor. After lessons, she was scheduled for etiquette training with Lady Ashworth, preparing for the evening's state dinner, where she would be making a brief appearance before being excused. Lady Ashworth was a woman in her late 60s who had trained multiple generations of royals in proper protocol and behavior. She was strict, traditional, and held firm beliefs about how young royals should conduct themselves. She had trained Charlotte's father when he was young, and she approached Charlotte's education with the same rigid expectations. Daniel could hear the etiquette session beginning in the music room down the hall. Lady Ashworth's crisp voice carried through the corridor. "Posture, Your Royal Highness. A princess never slouches. Shoulders back, chin level, hands folded properly." Charlotte's young voice responded with patience. "Yes, Lady Ashworth. Like this better? Now, we must practice your greeting for this evening. You will be introduced to the Prime Minister of Canada and his wife. What do you say? Good evening, Prime Minister. It's a pleasure to meet you. I hope you're enjoying your visit to London. It's adequate, but your tone lacks warmth. Remember, you must appear genuinely interested, even if you are not. That is the art of diplomacy." Daniel had heard similar sessions before. They were routine, sometimes tedious, but necessary preparation for a life lived in the public eye. He settled into the comfortable mental state that guards developed during long duty periods. Present and alert, but not actively engaged. Then he heard something different in Charlotte's voice. A sharpness, a challenge. "Lady Ashworth, may I ask a question?" "You may, though we have limited time before this evening." "Why must I pretend to be interested if I'm not? Isn't that dishonest?" There was a pause. Daniel found himself listening more carefully now. This was not the usual flow of an etiquette lesson. Your Royal Highness, it is not dishonesty. It is courtesy. We show respect to guests by being attentive and gracious. But you just said I should appear interested, even if I'm not. That seems like lying. Lady Ashworth's voice took on an edge. It is not your place to question these practices. They have served the royal family for generations. Your great-grandmother, Her late Majesty, understood this perfectly. My great-grandmother also changed many traditions when she thought they were wrong. My father told me she modernized the monarchy because she believed in being genuine with people. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. Charlotte was not backing down. This was unusual. Most children, especially royal children trained from birth to be obedient, did not challenge their instructors so directly. Your Royal Highness, we are discussing etiquette, not philosophy. Now please practice your curtsy. You will be curtsying to several guests this evening. I'd prefer not to. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't yet exploded. Daniel straightened slightly, his professional instincts alert. Something significant was happening. I beg your pardon? Lady Ashworth's voice was ice. I said I'd prefer not to curtsy. I've been reading about equality and respect. If I curtsy to adults, simply because they're adults, or hold positions of power, what does that teach about respect being mutual? Shouldn't respect go both ways? Your Royal Highness, you are 9 years old. You do not have the authority to decide which protocols you will follow. The curtsy is a sign of respect and tradition. But traditions can change. They do change. Women used to curtsy to men all the time, and now they don't. Things evolve. Daniel could hear the frustration building in Lady Ashworth's voice. This is highly inappropriate. You are not in a position to question centuries of royal protocol. Your mother, the Princess of Wales, curtsies to the king. Your father bows. This is how our system works. My parents curtsy and bow to the king because he's the monarch, and that's part of our constitutional structure. But you're asking me to curtsy 2 random guests at a dinner party just because they're adults and I'm a child. That's different. It is not different. It is basic manners and respect for one's elders. I do respect my elders. But respect isn't shown through bowing and scraping. It's shown through listening, being kind, and treating people with dignity. Those guests tonight will respect me more if I speak to them thoughtfully and show genuine interest in what they do, not because I've bent my knees at the right angle. Lady Ashworth's voice rose. Your Royal Highness, I have trained members of this family for 40 years. Never have I encountered such stubborn, disrespectful behavior. You will practice your curtsy now, or I will have no choice but to report your disobedience to your mother.
Ow.
There was a long pause. Daniel could imagine Charlotte standing her ground, considering her options. Deciding how far she was willing to push this confrontation. Then I suppose you'll need to speak with my mother, Charlotte said quietly. Because I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not, and I'm not going to perform rituals I don't believe in, just because that's how things have always been done. Daniel heard Lady Ashworth's sharp intake of breath. This is outrageous. Wait here. Do not move. Footsteps clicked rapidly down the corridor. Lady Ashworth was going to find Princess Catherine, and she was not happy. Daniel remained at his post, but his mind was racing. Charlotte had just refused a direct order from her etiquette instructor, something that would have been unthinkable for most royal children. He heard quiet movement from the music room. Then Charlotte appeared in the doorway, saw Daniel standing at his post, and seemed to realize that he had heard everything. Her cheeks flushed slightly. I suppose you think I'm being bratty, she said. Not as a question, but as a statement. Daniel remained in his professional stance, but allowed his expression to soften slightly. It's not my place to have opinions about such matters, Your Royal Highness, but you have them anyway. Everyone does. You just heard me refuse to practice curtsying. Lady Ashworth thinks I'm being disrespectful. May I speak freely, Your Royal Highness? Charlotte nodded, genuinely curious about what this guard, who had been a quiet presence in her life for years, might actually think. I think Daniel said carefully that you ask good questions. Questions about why we do things and whether those reasons still make sense. That's not bratty. That's thoughtful. But I refused to do what she told me to do. That's disobedience. It's also standing up for what you believe in. Those things can look the same, but feel very different. Charlotte considered this. My mother is going to be upset with me, perhaps. Or perhaps she'll understand why you feel the way you do. Lady Ashworth said my great-grandmother would have been disappointed in me. I served in the Guard during Her late Majesty's final years, Daniel said. And from what I observed, she respected people who thought for themselves, even when it made things complicated. Especially when it made things complicated. Charlotte looked at him with new interest. Really? Really. But Your Royal Highness, you should also know that how you express your beliefs matters as much as the beliefs themselves. You can stand firm on principles while still being kind to the people who disagree with you. Was I unkind to Lady Ashworth? You were honest. Whether you were kind is something you'll need to consider. Before Charlotte could respond, voices approached from down the corridor. Princess Catherine was coming, and she did not sound pleased. Lady Ashworth was speaking rapidly, her voice high with indignation. She simply refused. Outright refused. Said she didn't believe in curtsying and wouldn't do it. I've never experienced such defiance from a royal child. Never. Catherine's voice was calmer, but firm. Thank you, Lady Ashworth. I'll speak with Charlotte. Please give us privacy. But Your Royal Highness, she must understand that this behavior is unacceptable. The state dinner is in 6 hours, and she's completely unprepared. Thank you. The tone was unmistakable. Lady Ashworth was being dismissed. Catherine appeared in the corridor, her expression unreadable. She saw Charlotte standing near Daniel's post and gestured toward the music room. Charlotte, inside, please. Officer Morrison, thank you for your discretion. Daniel nodded professionally. Of course, ma'am. As Charlotte walked past her mother into the music room, Catherine followed and closed the door. But the room's acoustics meant that Daniel could still hear much of what was said, though he tried to focus on his duty rather than eavesdropping. Catherine's voice was measured. Lady Ashworth says you refused to practice your curtsy. Mummy, I did. She says you questioned the value of etiquette training and challenged her authority.
Yes.
I did that too. Charlotte, look at me. There was a pause. Because I don't understand why I have to pretend to be someone I'm not. Why I have to curtsy to people just because they're adults when respect should be about how we treat each other. It's not about who's older or more important. Why I have to smile and act interested when I'm not, which is basically lying. I don't understand why being royal means being fake. Another pause. Daniel couldn't see Catherine's expression, but he could imagine the internal struggle. As a mother, she had to address her daughter's disobedience. As someone who had joined the royal family from outside and had her own struggles with protocol and expectation, she probably understood Charlotte's feelings more than anyone. Being royal doesn't mean being fake, Catherine said finally. But it does mean understanding that sometimes we do things for reasons beyond our personal preferences. We represent something larger than ourselves. But shouldn't we represent authenticity? Shouldn't we represent treating people as equals? We should represent respect, tradition, service, and dignity. Sometimes that requires following protocols even when we personally might choose otherwise. So you're saying I have to curtsy tonight? I'm saying that you made a commitment to participate in this evening's dinner. People are expecting you. Walking away from that commitment because you've suddenly decided you don't like one aspect of it isn't principled. It's just convenient. Charlotte's voice wavered slightly. That's not fair. I'm not trying to be convenient. I'm trying to be honest about what I believe. Catherine's tone softened. I know, darling. And I actually admire that you're thinking about these things. But there's a time and a place for challenging traditions. In 6 hours before a state dinner where guests are expecting you to behave a certain way is not that time. So I just have to pretend. Just smile and curtsy and act like everything's fine when I don't believe in what I'm doing. No, you have to honor your commitments. You agreed to attend this dinner. You knew what that would involve. If you want to have a larger conversation about protocols and what they mean, I'm absolutely willing to have that conversation. Your father and I have had many of those conversations ourselves. But you have that conversation before you make commitments, not after. Daniel listened carefully, impressed by how Catherine was handling this. She wasn't dismissing Charlotte's concerns, but she also wasn't letting her daughter escape the consequences of her choices. "But Mummy, if I curtsy tonight, doesn't that mean I'm saying it's okay? That I accept this system? It means you're honoring your word, which is actually more important than any curtsy. If you say you'll do something, you do it. Even if it becomes inconvenient. Even if you change your mind. That's integrity." There was a long silence. Daniel could imagine Charlotte processing this, trying to find a way to maintain her principles while also acknowledging her mother's point. "I don't know if I can do it," Charlotte said quietly. "I don't know if I can stand there and curtsy and smile when inside. I'm angry about having to perform like a trained animal. First of all, you're not a trained animal. You're a young woman learning how to navigate a complicated role. Second, you absolutely can do it. You're one of the strongest people I know. The question isn't whether you can. It's whether you will. What if I won't?" Catherine's voice became very serious. "Then you'll face consequences. You'll disappoint people who are counting on you. You'll damage relationships with staff who have worked hard to prepare for tonight. You'll show everyone that your word means nothing when it becomes uncomfortable to keep it. Is that who you want to be?" "No," Charlotte whispered. "But I don't want to be someone who just goes along with things she doesn't believe in either. Then be someone who thinks carefully before making commitments. Be someone who asks these questions before agreeing to participate. Be someone who has the courage to speak up about traditions that need to change, but who also has the integrity to honor promises already made while working toward that change." Charlotte was crying now. Daniel could hear it in her voice. "I just wanted to stand up for what I think is right. I know, sweetheart, and there's nothing wrong with that. But standing up for what's right doesn't mean you get to ignore everything else. It means you learn to be strategic, to pick your battles, to fight for change in ways that actually create change rather than just making you feel better in the moment." "So I have to curtsy tonight?" "That's up to you. But if you choose not to, you need to understand what that choice means. It means calling your father right now and telling him you're backing out of a commitment at the last minute. It means I have to explain to the Prime Minister of Canada why you're not there when he specifically looking forward to meeting you. It means Lady Ashworth gets to say she was right, that you're just a disobedient child who doesn't understand duty." "I hate this," Charlotte said through her tears. "No. But Charlotte, this is what being royal actually is. It's not tiaras and palaces and people admiring you. It's making difficult choices about when to maintain tradition and when to challenge it. It's fulfilling obligations, even when they're uncomfortable. It's representing something bigger than yourself, even when you don't particularly feel like it." Catherine was probably hugging Charlotte, comforting her while also maintaining the boundaries she had set. "Can I ask you something, Mummy?" Charlotte's voice was muffled, probably against her mother's shoulder. "Of course. Do you ever have to do things you don't believe in? Do you ever have to curtsy or smile or act interested when inside you're thinking it's all stupid?" Catherine laughed softly. "All the time, darling. All the time. How do you do it without feeling like you're betraying yourself?" "I remind myself why I'm doing it. I'm not curtsying because I think I'm inferior to someone. I'm curtsying because I respect the position they hold and the system we're part of. I'm not smiling and making conversation because I'm fake. I'm doing it because making people feel valued and welcomed is actually important work, regardless of how I feel in that specific moment. But what about changing things? What about making the system better? You absolutely work to change things. Your father and I have changed quite a bit about how we approach royal duties. We've tried to modernize, to be more accessible, to show our real selves more than previous generations did. But we do that work thoughtfully, strategically, by earning people's respect first. You can't change a system people respect you in if you haven't first shown that you can function within that system." Charlotte was quiet, thinking. "So I have to prove I can do it their way before they'll listen to me about doing it differently." In a sense, yes. It's not fair, perhaps, but it's reality. People don't listen to revolutionaries who've never demonstrated that they understand what they're revolting against. It seems like it takes forever, does. Change is slow, frustratingly slow, but it's also more lasting that way.
Oh.
Daniel heard Charlotte take a shaky breath. Okay, I'll do the dinner tonight. I'll curtsy and smile and be the perfect little princess everyone expects. No, Catherine said firmly. You'll be yourself. You'll be thoughtful, engaged Charlotte, who asks good questions and makes people think. You'll happen to also curtsy, because that's part of the protocol. But don't diminish yourself by calling it being fake. You can follow protocol and still be authentic. I don't know how to do both, you'll learn. It's actually one of the most valuable skills you'll ever develop. The ability to honor tradition while still being true to yourself. Your great-grandmother was brilliant at it. She followed every protocol perfectly while also being completely herself. That's why people loved her. I miss her, Charlotte said quietly. I know. She would have loved this conversation, you know? She would have been impressed that you're thinking about these things, really? Even though I was being disobedient? You weren't being disobedient to her. You were questioning a system. There's a difference. She understood that difference better than anyone. There was a knock on the door. Lady Ashworth's voice came through. Your Royal Highness, I apologize for interrupting, but we really must continue preparations if Princess Charlotte is to be ready for this evening. Catherine called back. One moment, please, Lady Ashworth. Then quieter to Charlotte. What do you want to do? Charlotte's voice was stronger now. I want to go back to practice. I want to do the dinner tonight. I want to be good at the curtsy, so people don't think I'm clumsy or unprepared. But, Mummy, I also want to have that bigger conversation about protocols and what they mean. Soon. Not 6 hours before an event, but soon. We'll have that conversation. I promise. This weekend, the four of us, will sit down and talk about what traditions you think need to change and why. Your father will want to be part of that discussion too. You'll really listen. You won't just tell me I'm too young to understand? I'll really listen. You're not too young to have opinions about your own life. But you're also not so old that you can't learn how to express those opinions in ways that create real change, rather than just conflict. The door opened. Catherine addressed Lady Ashworth. Charlotte would like to continue her preparations. She understands the importance of tonight and wants to do her absolute best. I trust you'll help her achieve that. Lady Ashworth looked surprised, then suspicious. She's ready to practice her curtsy? Charlotte stepped forward, her chin up, her posture perfect. Yes, Lady Ashworth. I apologize for my earlier behavior. I had some questions about protocol that I should have raised at a more appropriate time. I'm ready to practice now. Lady Ashworth studied her carefully. Your Royal Highness, I appreciate the apology. However, I want to be clear that etiquette and protocol are not optional for someone in your position. You may have questions, and that's appropriate. But outright refusal is not. I understand. Do you? Because what I witnessed earlier was not simply asking questions. It was defiance. Charlotte's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. You're right. I was defiant. I let my frustration with the system override my commitment to my responsibilities. That was wrong. But I would still like to understand why we do certain things, even if I ultimately need to do them anyway. Lady Ashworth looked at Catherine, who nodded slightly. Very well. Let's begin again. But Your Royal Highness, understand that this evening is extremely important. The eyes of the world will be watching. Any misstep, any display of attitude or reluctance will be noticed and commented upon. You represent not just yourself, but your entire family. I understand the stakes, Charlotte said quietly. For the next 2 hours, Charlotte practiced. Daniel heard her repeat greetings, perfect her curtsy, rehearse conversations. To his ears, she sounded composed but not robotic, polite but not fake. She asked Lady Ashworth questions about why certain phrases were preferred, about the history behind specific protocols, and Lady Ashworth, perhaps softened by Charlotte's earlier apology, actually answered thoughtfully rather than dismissively. At one point, Daniel heard Lady Ashworth say, You know, Your Royal Highness, you remind me very much of your great-grandmother at your age. She asked questions too, constantly. It drove her instructors mad, but she was trying to understand the system so she could work within it more effectively. That's what made her such a remarkable queen, really. She asked questions like I do. Oh yes. She once refused to practice her wave for a public appearance because she said it made her feel like she was imitating the queen rather than being herself. Her mother was furious, but her father sat her down and explained that the wave wasn't about imitating anyone. It was about connecting with people who had traveled long distances and waited for hours just to see her. After that, she practiced eagerly because she understood the purpose. "What's the purpose of the curtsy?" Charlotte asked. "Really?" Lady Ashworth was quiet for a moment. "The curtsy began as a gesture of deference." "Certainly. But over time, it's evolved into something more nuanced. When you curtsy to someone, you're acknowledging their position and the dignity of their role. You're also demonstrating your own grace and composure. It's a moment of mutual respect, properly understood. You're not diminishing yourself. You're elevating the moment." I never thought about it that way. Most people don't. They see it as antiquated and hierarchical. And perhaps it is, in some ways. But it can also be beautiful. A physical representation of respect and occasion. Charlotte practiced her curtsy again. "Like this? Beautiful, Your Royal Highness. Absolutely beautiful. You see? When you understand the why, the how becomes easier." Later that afternoon, as preparations intensified throughout the palace, Daniel's shift changed. He was reassigned to the state dining room for the evening event, which meant he would actually witness how Charlotte handled the situation she had been so conflicted about. The dining room was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over perfectly set tables. Flowers arranged by the palace's master gardener created elegant centerpieces. Staff members made final adjustments to place settings and ensured every detail was perfect. Guests began arriving at 7 o'clock. Daniel stood at his post near the entrance, watching as dignitaries, politicians, and honored guests entered. The Prime Minister of Canada arrived with his wife, both looking appropriately impressed by the grandeur of their surroundings. At 7:30, the royal family was announced. Prince William and Princess Catherine entered first, followed by their children. Prince George looked slightly uncomfortable in his formal attire but maintained good posture. Prince Louis, younger and less accustomed to such formal events, held his mother's hand tightly. And then Charlotte entered. She wore a navy blue dress with modest silver accents, her hair styled simply but elegantly. Her posture was perfect, her expression composed but warm. Daniel watched carefully, wondering if he would see any trace of the conflict from earlier that day. The Prime Minister of Canada approached the royal family, and formal introductions began. Daniel watched as Charlotte executed a perfect curtsy, the movement graceful and natural. But what struck him most was her face. She wasn't performing a role or going through empty motions. She looked genuinely present, genuinely engaged in the moment. "Prime Minister, it's wonderful to meet you," Charlotte said, her voice clear and confident. "I've been learning about Canada's role in environmental conservation. I understand you've implemented some remarkable policies regarding national parks." The Prime Minister looked surprised and pleased. "Why, yes, Your Royal Highness. That's been a priority for our government. I'm impressed that you're aware of our conservation efforts. I think what countries do to protect nature is one of the most important things we can measure them by," Charlotte continued, "especially now when so much is at risk." As Charlotte conversed with the Prime Minister, demonstrating both knowledge and genuine curiosity, Daniel realized what he was witnessing. Charlotte hadn't chosen to simply submit to protocol. She had found a way to honor tradition while remaining authentically herself. The curtsy was there, executed perfectly, but it wasn't the focus. Her engagement, her intelligence, her authentic interest in the guest. That was what made the interaction meaningful. This was what Catherine had been trying to teach her. You could follow protocol and still be real. You could honor tradition and still be yourself. The dinner proceeded smoothly. Charlotte was seated at the main table, between the Prime Minister's wife and a Canadian diplomat. Daniel, from his position near the wall, could see her throughout the meal. She listened attentively when others spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and even made the adults laugh several times at one point. The Prime Minister's wife mentioned something about the challenges of raising children in the public eye. Charlotte responded with surprising candor. It's difficult sometimes knowing that people are always watching and judging. You want to be yourself, but you also don't want to embarrass your family or your country. Finding that balance is something I'm still learning." The woman looked at her with genuine sympathy. "You're already handling it with remarkable grace, Your Royal Highness. When I was 9, I certainly wasn't capable of sitting through formal dinners and making interesting conversation with adults." "I don't know about that," Charlotte said with a slight smile. "Earlier today, I had a bit of a moment about having to be here at all. I wasn't very graceful then." Catherine, who was seated nearby and overheard this, looked at her daughter with an expression that mixed surprise, concern, and something like pride. Charlotte had just revealed a vulnerability, shown a crack in the perfect princess facade. But she had done it in a way that was honest without being inappropriate. The dinner lasted 2 hours. When it was time for the children to be excused, as planned, Charlotte stood and performed another perfect curtsy, this time to the table at large. "Thank you all for the wonderful conversation," she said. "I've learned a great deal this evening." As she left the dining room with her brothers, she passed close to where Daniel stood at his post. Their eyes met for just a moment, and she gave him the smallest nod. An acknowledgement, perhaps, or a thank you for his earlier words of encouragement. After the children left, the dinner continued for another hour. Daniel remained at his post, listening to fragments of conversation. Multiple guests commented on how impressive Charlotte had been, how articulate and engaged. The Prime Minister specifically mentioned to Prince William how much he had enjoyed speaking with her. "She's quite remarkable," the Prime Minister said. "Not just well-mannered, but genuinely thoughtful. She asked questions that showed real understanding of complex issues." William smiled. "Charlotte is definitely her own person. She keeps us on our toes. I imagine she asks difficult questions at home, too. Constantly. She wants to understand why things are the way they are. Not to be defiant, but to really comprehend the systems she's part of. It can be challenging, but it's also exactly what I hope for her. I want her to think critically, to question, to grow into someone who can help shape the monarchy rather than just occupy a role within it." After the dinner concluded and guests departed, Daniel's shift finally ended. He returned to the guard barracks, exhausted from the long day. His fellow guards were gathered in the common room, and several had been assigned to the dinner as well. "Did you see Princess Charlotte tonight?" one guard named Marcus asked. "She was incredible. Completely composed, engaging with guests like she'd been doing it for years." "I heard she had a meltdown earlier today," another guard chimed in. "Refused to practice her curtsy, told Lady Ashworth off. But you'd never know it from how she acted tonight." Daniel listened, but didn't contribute. He knew more than they did about what had actually happened, but it wasn't his place to share. Charlotte's struggle that afternoon, her conversation with her mother, her ultimate decision to honor her commitment while staying true to herself, those were private moments he had witnessed only because of his position. But he also knew that what these guards were describing wasn't the full story. Charlotte hadn't had a meltdown. She had raised legitimate questions about protocol and authenticity. She had been thoughtful, not defiant, and her mother had guided her not by demanding obedience, but by helping her understand the difference between honoring commitments and abandoning principles. Several weeks passed. Daniel continued his regular duties, often seeing Charlotte in passing, but rarely directly interacting. Then one morning, he was summoned to Princess Catherine's office. He had no idea why, and felt a flutter of anxiety. Had someone complained about him? Had he somehow violated protocol? When he entered, Catherine was seated at her desk, reviewing documents. She looked up and smiled. "Officer Morrison, thank you for coming. Please sit down." Daniel sat, still uncertain about the purpose of this meeting. "I wanted to speak with you about the afternoon of the state dinner," Catherine began. "I'm aware that you overheard the conversation between Charlotte and myself." Daniel felt his face flush. "Ma'am, I apologize. I was at my assigned post." I tried not to listen, but the acoustics. Catherine held up a hand. "You're not in trouble. Actually, I wanted to thank you." "Thank me, ma'am." "Charlotte told me about your conversation with her before I arrived. About how you told her that standing up for beliefs and being disobedient can look the same but feel different. About how you encouraged her to consider not just what she believed, but how she expressed it." I hope I didn't overstep, ma'am. It's not my place to advise you didn't overstep. You said exactly what she needed to hear, and you said it in a way that she could receive. Sometimes children need to hear wisdom from someone who isn't their parent, someone who sees them in a different context. Daniel relaxed slightly. Princess Charlotte is remarkable, if I may say so. The questions she was asking, they weren't childish or rebellious. They were genuine attempts to understand her role and reconcile it with her values. I know. And that's exactly why your intervention was so valuable. You validated her questions while also helping her see the bigger picture. She told me that you said her great-grandmother respected people who thought for themselves even when it made things complicated. I did say that. I hope it was appropriate. It was perfect. Charlotte has been struggling with feeling like she has to choose between being authentic and being royal. You helped her see that those things don't have to be in conflict. Catherine paused, looking thoughtful. Officer Morrison, how long have you been in the Royal Protection Service? 9 years, ma'am. 3 on your family's details specifically. And in that time, you've seen quite a bit. Private moments, family dynamics, challenges that we face behind closed doors. Yes, ma'am. Though I maintain strict discretion about anything I witness, I know you do. That's actually what I wanted to discuss. The children are getting older. They're asking harder questions, facing more complex situations. They need people around them who can see them as individuals, not just as roles to be filled. People who can offer perspective without agenda. Daniel wasn't sure where this was going, so he remained silent, waiting. I'm establishing a new position within our household, Catherine continued. A liaison between the protection staff and the family. Someone who can bridge the gap between security needs and personal development. Someone the children can talk to when they need perspective from outside the immediate family, but from someone who understands the unique pressures they face. That sounds like an excellent idea. Ma'am, I'd like you to fill that role. Daniel stared at her, stunned. Ma'am, I'm honored, but I'm not qualified. I'm a guard, not a counselor or advisor. You're someone who sees people clearly. Someone who can be honest without being harsh. Someone who understands duty, but also understands humanity. That's exactly what this role requires. I don't know what to say. You'll consider it. You wouldn't leave the protection service. You'd still maintain your guard duties. But you'd also be available to the children when they need someone to talk to. Someone who's seen the reality of royal life, but isn't enmeshed in the politics and expectations. Daniel thought about Charlotte's face that afternoon when she realized he had heard her argument with Lady Ashworth. How she had been preparing for judgment but had instead received understanding. How that small moment of validation had perhaps helped her find the strength to honor her commitment while maintaining her principles. I would be honored to serve in that capacity, ma'am. Catherine smiled. Excellent. We'll formalize the arrangement over the next few weeks. In the meantime, continue as you have been. The children trust you, even if they don't fully realize it yet. That trust is valuable. As Daniel left Catherine's office, he felt the weight of new responsibilities settling on his shoulders. This wasn't what he had envisioned when he joined the Queen's Guard 9 years ago. He had thought his role would be standing at posts, protecting against physical threats, maintaining tradition. But perhaps the most important protection he could offer wasn't against external dangers. Perhaps it was helping these young royals navigate the internal conflicts between duty and authenticity, between tradition and progress, between who they were expected to be and who they actually were. A few days later, Daniel was at his usual post when Charlotte passed by on her way to lessons. She stopped, which was unusual. Typically, the royal children walked past guards as if they were furniture. Not because they were rude, but because that was the expected protocol. Officer Morrison, Charlotte said formally. May I speak with you for a moment? Of course, Your Royal Highness. Charlotte glanced around to ensure no one else was immediately present. I wanted to thank you for what you said that day about standing up for beliefs versus being disobedient. It helped me think about things differently. I'm glad I could help, Your Royal Highness. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About how expressing beliefs matters as much as the beliefs themselves. I'm trying to get better at that. at questioning things in ways that actually create conversation instead of just creating conflict. That's very wise, Your Royal Highness. I had a conversation with my father and mother over the weekend about protocols and traditions, about which ones still make sense and which ones might need to evolve. It was a really good conversation. My father said I made him think about things he's just always accepted. That sounds like a valuable discussion. Charlotte smiled. I still don't love curtsying, but I understand it better now. And I'm learning that you can honor something while also working to change it. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Your Royal Highness. Officer Morrison, can I ask you something? You've been around the royal family for a long time. Do you think we'll ever change? Really change? Or are we just stuck being symbols of an old system that doesn't fit the modern world anymore? It was a profound question from a 9-year-old. Daniel chose his words carefully. I think, Your Royal Highness, that the royal family has always evolved, sometimes slowly, sometimes faster. But each generation brings new perspectives, new questions, new ways of thinking. You and your brothers will shape what the monarchy means for your generation. The question isn't whether you'll change things. The question is what kinds of changes you'll make and why. Charlotte nodded thoughtfully. That's what my father says too. He says he and Mummy have changed things by showing that royals can be both formal and real, both traditional and modern. But it feels slow. Sometimes I just want everything to be different right now. Change is almost always slower than we'd like, Your Royal Highness. But that doesn't mean it's not happening, I suppose. Thank you, Officer Morrison, for listening, and for not treating me like I'm just a child who doesn't understand things. You understand more than most adults, Your Royal Highness. That's both your gift and your burden. As Charlotte walked away toward her lessons, Daniel reflected on how this young girl was already grappling with questions that many people never confronted. Questions about authenticity, duty, tradition, and progress. Questions about how to be true to yourself while honoring commitments to others. Questions about how to work within systems you didn't create but were responsible for representing. Months passed. Daniel settled into his expanded role, becoming a trusted presence for all 3 children. George would sometimes ask him questions about military service and what it meant to serve something larger than yourself. Louis would talk to him about his frustrations with always being the youngest and feeling like no one took him seriously. And Charlotte would engage him in deeper conversations about purpose, meaning, and how to navigate the complex reality of being royal in a changing world. One spring afternoon, Daniel was summoned again to Princess Catherine's office. This time Prince William was there as well. Daniel felt a flutter of nervousness, wondering if perhaps he had overstepped in some way. He's gotten too close, offered too much opinion. Officer Morrison, please sit, William said, his tone friendly. We wanted to speak with you about something important. Of course, sir. Catherine spoke first. You've been wonderful with the children over these past months. They trust you, they confide in you, and I think you've helped them navigate some difficult moments. I'm honored to help in any way I can, ma'am. William leaned forward. Charlotte, in particular, has formed a strong bond with you. She's told us about several conversations you've had, about duty, about authenticity, about how to question traditions while still honoring them. Daniel felt uncertain. I hope I haven't been inappropriate in any of those conversations, sir. Not at all. Actually, you've said things that Catherine and I couldn't say precisely because we're her parents. Sometimes children need outside perspective. They need to hear from people who aren't emotionally invested in the same ways. However, Catherine interjected, we're a bit concerned about something. Charlotte has become quite attached to your opinion. She quotes you frequently in family discussions. She references things you've said as justification for her positions on various issues. Daniel's stomach sank. I apologize if I've overstepped my boundaries. I never intended to undermine your authority or influence her inappropriately. We know that, William said quickly, and you haven't undermined anything. But we need to have a conversation about boundaries and about how much influence is appropriate. Catherine pulled out a piece of paper. Last week, Charlotte wrote an essay for her history class about how institutions evolve. Her teacher was quite impressed, but when I read it, I recognize several phrases and concepts that sound very much like things you've said to her. She handed Daniel the paper. He read through Charlotte's neat handwriting, seeing indeed several ideas that had emerged from their conversations. The essay was thoughtful, well-argued, and showed sophisticated thinking about change, tradition, and progress. "It's an excellent essay," Daniel said carefully, "but I see your concern. She's drawing heavily on our conversations rather than developing her own thinking." "Exactly," William said, "and that's natural for her age. Children learn by absorbing ideas from adults they respect, but we need to make sure she's developing her own voice, not just echoing yours." "I understand completely, sir. Should I limit my interactions with her?" Catherine shook her head. "No, but we need you to shift your approach. Instead of offering perspectives, ask questions. Instead of sharing your thoughts on issues, encourage her to develop and articulate her own. Help her think rather than telling her what to think." "That makes perfect sense. I apologize if I've been too directive." "You haven't been directive at all," William assured him. "But Charlotte is at an age where she's forming her identity, figuring out what she believes and why. She needs space to make mistakes, to try on different ideas, to discover her own voice. If she relies too heavily on your guidance, she might skip that crucial developmental process." Daniel nodded, understanding the delicate balance they were describing. "I'll be much more mindful going forward. I want to support her development, not replace it." "We know you do," Catherine said. "That's why we're having this conversation rather than simply restricting your contact with her. We trust your judgment. We just want to make sure Charlotte is developing her own judgment." Over the following weeks, Daniel carefully adjusted his approach. When Charlotte came to him with questions about protocol or tradition, instead of sharing his perspective, he asked her what she thought and why. When she expressed frustration with royal expectations, instead of validating her feelings, he asked her to think through the purpose of those expectations and whether there might be value in them. It was harder, in some ways, to guide without leading. But he saw Charlotte begin to think more independently, to develop arguments based on her own reasoning rather than borrowed perspectives. One afternoon, Charlotte came to him with a question that had clearly been troubling her. "Officer Morrison, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course, Your Royal Highness." "Do you ever regret your career choice? Do you ever wish you had done something else with your life?" It was an unexpected question. "What makes you ask that?" "I've been thinking about how you spend your days standing at posts, following orders, protecting people who don't always appreciate what you do. It seems like it would be frustrating, like you might want more freedom, more choice about how you spend your time." Daniel smiled. "Those are good observations. Can I ask you something back?" "Yes. Do you ever regret being royal? Do you wish you had been born into a different family, where you'd have more freedom?" Charlotte considered this. "Sometimes. But then I remember that every life has constraints. My friends at school have different limitations. Their parents have different expectations. Nobody gets complete freedom." "Exactly. So the question isn't whether I wish I had complete freedom. The question is whether I find meaning in the constraints I've chosen. And I do. I serve something I believe in. I protect people who matter. I maintain traditions that connect us to history. Those things give my life purpose. But you chose this. I didn't choose to be royal. That's true. But now that you are royal, you get to choose what kind of royal you'll be. You get to choose how you'll approach your role, what you'll stand for, how you'll evolve the traditions you inherit. That's a different kind of freedom, perhaps, but it's still real." Charlotte was quiet for a moment. "You didn't answer my question. You just asked me questions back." Daniel laughed. "You noticed that? You've been doing it for weeks now? Every time I ask you something, you turn it around and make me think, instead of just telling me what you think. Is that frustrating?" "Very, but I think I understand why you're doing it." "My parents talked to you, didn't they? They told you to stop influencing me so much." "They expressed some concerns about making sure you develop your own thinking rather than relying too heavily on others' perspectives. They think I'm just copying you. I think you're at an important age where you need to discover your own voice." Charlotte sighed. "I hate how everyone is always so careful with me. like I'm fragile or something. I just want honest answers. I am being honest with you, Your Royal Highness. But the most honest thing I can do is help you learn to find your own answers, because I won't always be here. And even when I am here, my answers are based on my experiences, my values, my understanding of the world. Yours need to be based on your experiences, your values, your understanding. But how do I develop my own understanding if nobody tells me what they think? People will tell you what they think. Constantly. Everyone will have opinions about what you should do, how you should act, what you should believe. The challenge isn't getting input. The challenge is filtering that input, deciding what resonates with you. What makes sense based on your own principles and judgment. That's what I'm trying to help you develop. The ability to think critically about all the advice you'll receive throughout your life. Charlotte sat down on a nearby bench, looking thoughtful. That's actually really hard. It is. Much harder than just accepting what trusted people tell you. But it's also what will make you an effective leader someday. I'm not going to be a leader. George will be king. I'll just be the spare. Will be whatever you choose to be. Your official role might be different from your brother's, but leadership isn't about titles. It's about influence, about how you think and act and inspire others. You can be a leader in whatever capacity you find yourself. You're doing it again. Turning my statement into a question about how I see myself. Daniel smiled. I suppose I am. It's annoying, but also kind of helpful. Fine. I'll work on developing my own thinking. But Officer Morrison, can I ask for one thing? What's that? Even if you can't tell me what you think, can you at least tell me when I'm thinking about things in ways that are thoughtful versus ways that are just reactive or emotional? I can absolutely do that. That's not telling you what to think. That's helping you think more clearly. Good, because I want to be the kind of person who thinks things through. Not the kind of person who just reacts to everything. You're already becoming that person. Your Royal Highness. The months turned into years. Charlotte grew from a questioning 9-year-old into a thoughtful 12-year-old who had indeed developed her own voice, her own perspectives, her own understanding of what it meant to be royal in a changing world. She still challenged traditions, but she did so more strategically, more thoughtfully. She still asked difficult questions, but she had learned to frame them in ways that invited dialogue rather than creating conflict. She still struggled with the constraints of royal life, but she had found ways to be authentic within those constraints. Daniel watched her growth with quiet pride. He had played a small role in her development, but ultimately, Charlotte had become herself through her own efforts, her own thinking, her own courage to question and grow. One day, when Charlotte was 13, she asked to speak with him privately. They met in one of the palace gardens, where they had had many conversations over the years. Officer Morrison, I wanted to thank you, Charlotte began. For everything you've taught me over these years. I haven't taught you much, Your Royal Highness. You've learned by doing your own thinking. How to think, rather than what to think. How to question respectfully. How to honor tradition while still working toward change. Those lessons have shaped who I'm becoming. I'm honored to have played any role in your development, Charlotte smiled. I've been thinking about that day. The day of the state dinner, when I refused to practice my curtsy. Do you remember that? I do. I was so sure I was right. So convinced that I was standing up for my principles by refusing to do something I didn't believe in. But I was actually just being stubborn and short-sighted.
Oh.
You were 9 years old and grappling with complex questions. That wasn't stubborn. That was brave. Maybe, but what I learned from that day, and from all our conversations since, is that real bravery isn't just standing up for what you believe. It's being willing to examine why you believe it, to consider other perspectives, to change your mind when you learn new information. That's very wise. I also learned that you can honor commitments and still work for change, that you can function within systems while also trying to improve them. That being authentic doesn't mean refusing to compromise. It means understanding why you're compromising and ensuring your compromises don't betray your core values. Daniel felt a surge of emotion. This young woman had taken the seeds of conversations they had shared and grown them into sophisticated understanding. She had become the kind of person who could navigate the impossible balance between tradition and progress, between duty and authenticity, between who she was expected to be and who she actually was. Your Royal Highness, you've become a remarkable young woman. I have no doubt you'll continue to challenge traditions thoughtfully, to ask important questions, and to help shape what the monarchy means for your generation and beyond. I hope so. But Officer Morrison, I want you to know something. That day when you told me that standing up for beliefs and being disobedient can look the same but feel different, it gave me permission to be complex, to hold multiple truths at once, to honor my commitments while still questioning the systems I'm part of. That gift of complexity, of nuance, has been one of the most valuable things anyone has ever given me. Years later, when Daniel eventually retired from the Royal Guard after 25 years of service, Princess Charlotte attended his retirement ceremony. She was 16 then, poised and confident, already making waves with her thoughtful approach to royal duties and her willingness to question outdated traditions while respecting the institution she represented. At the ceremony, Charlotte asked to say a few words. Officer Morrison served my family with distinction for many years. But his greatest service wasn't in protecting us from physical threats. It was in helping us, especially me, learn to think critically about our roles, our traditions, and our responsibilities. He taught me that asking questions isn't disrespectful, that honoring commitments doesn't mean abandoning principles, that you can work within systems while also working to improve them. She paused, looking directly at Daniel. When I was 9 years old, I had a moment where I refused to follow protocol because I didn't understand why I should. Officer Morrison could have simply told me to obey. Instead, he helped me understand that the question wasn't whether to follow protocol. The question was understanding the purpose of protocol so I could follow it meaningfully rather than mindlessly. That distinction has shaped how I approach everything in my life. After the ceremony, Charlotte approached Daniel privately. I never told you this, but my mother shared with me that you had been hesitant about offering me guidance, that you worried about influencing me too much. I want you to know that your influence has been exactly what I needed. Not someone telling me what to think, but someone teaching me how to think. There's a profound difference. You would have figured it out anyway, Your Royal Highness. You have a natural inclination toward thoughtfulness and justice. Maybe, but you helped me channel those inclinations in productive ways. You helped me understand that being a royal who questions traditions isn't about rebellion. It's about ensuring that traditions continue to serve their purpose and changing them when they don't. You've already changed quite a bit, you know. The way you approach public duties, the questions you ask in interviews, the causes you champion. You're showing that it's possible to be both respectful of tradition and committed to progress. That's what you taught me. That those things aren't opposites. They're partners in creating meaningful change. As Daniel left palace service that day, he reflected on his career. He had protected the royal family from countless potential threats, served with distinction, maintained the highest standards of professionalism. But his proudest achievement was helping one young princess learn to think for herself, to question respectfully, to honor tradition while working toward progress. The story of Princess Charlotte's refusal to curtsy might have seemed like a simple tale of childish rebellion, but it was actually the beginning of something much more significant. It was the moment when a 9-year-old girl began grappling with questions about authenticity, duty, tradition, and progress. Questions that would shape her entire life and eventually the future of the monarchy itself. And Royal Guard officer Daniel Morrison, who had been present for that pivotal moment, who had offered guidance without imposing direction, who had helped Charlotte learn to think rather than telling her what to think, had played a quiet but crucial role in that transformation. Years later, when Charlotte was asked in an interview about the moments that shaped her approach to royal duty, she mentioned that afternoon without naming Daniel specifically. There was a time when I was young and I questioned whether I could be both authentic and royal, whether I could honor traditions I didn't fully understand or agree with. A wise person helped me see that the question wasn't either or. It was how to do both, how to function within systems while also working to improve them, how to respect tradition while also ensuring those traditions continue to serve meaningful purposes. That lesson has guided everything I've done since." The interviewer pressed for more details about who had given her this guidance. Charlotte simply smiled. "Someone who understood that the best way to help people grow is to teach them how to think, not what to think. Someone who believed in my ability to find my own answers rather than simply accepting others' answers. That kind of faith in another person's potential is rare and precious." And somewhere, watching that interview, Daniel Morrison understood that the moment he had chosen to speak honestly with a confused 9-year-old princess, encouraging her to honor her commitments while maintaining her principles, had rippled forward through years, shaping not just one young woman's development, but potentially the future of an entire institution. The royal guard who revealed the moment Princess Charlotte refused an order didn't just reveal a story of temporary rebellion. He revealed a story of growth, of learning to balance competing values, of discovering that authenticity and duty could coexist. It was a story that reminded everyone that the most important moments aren't always the dramatic public ones. Sometimes they're the quiet conversations in palace corridors, the gentle guidance offered at crucial moments, the faith shown in a young person's ability to find their own path. And Princess Charlotte, who had once refused to curtsy because she didn't understand its purpose, grew into a young woman who could execute perfect protocol while also questioning when that protocol needed to evolve. She became living proof that you could honor tradition without being imprisoned by it, that you could respect the past while also shaping the future, that you could be authentically yourself while also fulfilling duties you didn't choose but accepted with grace and purpose. That was the real story Officer Daniel Morrison revealed, not of a spoiled child refusing orders, but of a thoughtful young woman learning to navigate impossible complexity with wisdom beyond her years. And he revealed it not through gossip or betrayal of confidence, but through his example of how to guide without controlling, teach without imposing, and trust in another person's capacity to become their best self.